I never thought I'd be sitting here typing this out, sharing my story with whoever might read it. But here I am, and I feel like it might help to get it all down. So, let's start from the beginning. My name is Jake, and I was married to Laura for nearly 8 years. We had what I thought was a solid relationship. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but I believed we were in it for the long haul. We had a comfortable life together, a nice house, a golden retriever named Max, and plans for the future that included kids. But lately, things just felt off. Laura started working longer hours at her job as a marketing manager. I trusted her completely, and I thought it was just her trying to climb the corporate ladder. But there were those little signs. She'd come home late and smell like someone else's cologne, and the way she'd glance at her phone whenever I walked into the room felt suspicious. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, but deep down, my gut was gnawing at me. The turning point came when I went on my annual hunting trip with my buddies. It was supposed to be a weekend of camaraderie, beers, and the thrill of the hunt. The first night, I settled into my cabin and decided to check in with Laura. She was acting strangely on the phone, all distracted and vague. When I pressed her on what she was up to, she just said, "Oh, just hanging out with some friends." That's when I got the idea to set up a few cameras around our lake house. I had installed them a while back for security, but had never really thought much of it until now. That night, I reviewed the footage just to ease my mind. I expected to see the usual Laura curled up with a book or perhaps some Netflix. What I saw shook me to my core. There she was, my wife, laughing and flirting with a guy named Ryan, one of her colleagues, I later found out. I remember the moment distinctly. I felt the air leave my lungs. They were all over each other like a couple of teenagers. The way she smiled at him, touched his arm, and leaned in close. It was everything I had thought was reserved for me. My heart raced and anger surged through me like fire. I wanted to scream, but I was alone in the woods. The next morning I was a mess. A part of me thought about just ignoring it, convincing myself that maybe I had misunderstood what I'd seen. But I knew I couldn't just walk away from this. I wasn't going to let her get away with cheating on me. I devised a plan, a way to confront her without it being a total explosion. I'd collect the evidence first and present it to her. I wanted to see the look on her face when I showed her what she had done. With my heart pounding and a sense of urgency, I made a copy of the footage. I wanted to make sure I had the upper hand when we finally had our conversation. I spent the rest of the trip in a haze, not enjoying the hunting like I used to. Instead, I was plotting my revenge and thinking about how best to bring this all to light. The moment I returned home, I felt like I was walking into a minefield. Laura was there, fresh from a shower and wearing that smile that used to melt my heart. But all I could think about was the betrayal, and I struggled to mask my anger as I got ready for the confrontation. I decided to wait until after dinner, to give her a chance to relax. Little did she know that her entire world was about to implode. I gathered my strength, sat her down, and prepared for battle. I knew it would be stormy, but nothing could prepare me for what was coming. Her demeanor shifted as we sat together, and looking back, I realized I should have seen the signs. She had that cocky attitude, the one that always came out when she felt in control. I took a deep breath, held up my phone, and said, "We need to talk." I played the footage for her, and I'll never forget the moment her eyes widened in shock. All the bravado faded as she tried to grasp the reality of what I was showing her. It was a whirlwind of accusations and excuses. She claimed it was harmless, just some fun, but the way she squirmed under my gaze told me she knew the truth. The longer we talked, the more it became clear she wasn't just apologetic, she was angry that I had caught her. "You don't understand, Jake," Laura said, her voice rising. "It meant nothing, it was just a mistake." But it was more than a mistake. It was a betrayal that cut deep, and I could feel the betrayal seeping into every fiber of my being. I had trusted her, believed in her, and here she was, trying to downplay the affair as if it were a mere inconvenience. The confrontation ended in tears, hers, not mine. I felt a cold detachment wash over me. I was angry, devastated, and yet strangely calm. I had the evidence, and I wasn't going to let this slide. What came next would change everything. The emotional weight of the moment settled heavily on my shoulders as I realized I was standing at a crossroads. I could feel the festering wound of betrayal and anger beginning to heal as I contemplated my next move. I knew I had to make a decision, and it was time to take control of my life. If you'd like to hear more about how this story unfolds, just let me know. After that confrontation, I felt like a storm had just swept through my life, leaving me in a disarray of emotions. Laura was still sitting there, tears streaming down her cheeks, trying to explain herself. But I was no longer listening to her excuses. I was processing the betrayal and what it meant for our marriage. I had spent years building a life with this woman, and now, in just a matter of minutes, everything felt like it was crumbling around me. I saw the hurt in her eyes, but it didn't spark the compassion I thought it would. Instead, it only fueled my anger. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done, to understand that this wasn't just some fleeting moment of fun, it was a choice. "You think this is just a mistake?" I shot back, my voice steady but cold. "You think that sneaking around behind my back is harmless? This isn't just flirting, Laura. You were with him." I could feel the heat rising in my chest again as I pointed towards the screen still displaying their intimate moments. Her responses were a flurry of justifications. How lonely she felt, how we had grown apart over the years, and how she had just been looking for some excitement. Each excuse felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my heart. I wanted to scream, to throw her words back at her, but I held back. I had to stay composed, at least for the moment. I decided to leave the room, needing to gather my thoughts. I paced the living room, my mind racing with questions. How could she do this? Was it just Ryan, or had there been others? I felt like I was in a fog, and the clarity I had hoped for from our conversation was nowhere to be found. When I returned, Laura was still sitting there, looking small and broken, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. I felt like I was on the outside looking in, and the anger bubbling inside me started to simmer. "I don't want to talk about this anymore," I finally said. "I need time to think." The following days were surreal. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't focus, and my coworkers noticed. My boss pulled me aside, concerned about my mood. I brushed it off, telling him I was just going through a rough patch, but the truth was, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I couldn't escape the thoughts of Laura and Ryan, and I replayed their moments together over and over again in my mind. I knew I had to take control back. I started following my instincts, digging a little deeper into Laura's life. I went through her belongings while she was at work. I had never done anything like this before. I felt like a stranger in my own home, but I needed to know the extent of her betrayal. What I found made my stomach churn. In the back of her nightstand, I discovered a pack of condoms, unused but clearly there for a purpose. My heart sank. This was more than just a fling. This was premeditated. She was actively planning to cheat on me, which made the betrayal sting even more. To think she had been lying to my face while keeping this hidden from me was infuriating. I also found text messages on her phone that had been deleted, messages that hinted at secret meetups, late-night chats, and all the things she had assured me were merely a mistake. The lies were piling up, and with each piece of evidence, my resolve hardened. I couldn't let her manipulate me any longer. I decided to confront her again, but this time I wanted to catch her off guard. I wanted her to see that I was not the fool she thought I was. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, the recording app ready to catch her in her lies. I had a plan. I would let her think she still had a chance to talk her way out of this, but I was going to expose her for what she really was. When she got home that evening, I could see a glimmer of hope in her eyes, as if she believed we could somehow fix this. I played the part, acting as if I was willing to listen to her. She started off with the same old narrative, how she was sorry, how it was just a mistake, how we could work through this. But I was prepared this time. I interrupted her, pulling out my phone and hitting the record button. "Let's talk about Ryan," I said, my voice steady, "and how it was more than just a mistake." Her eyes widened in disbelief as I played the hidden footage of her and Ryan laughing together, sharing intimate moments that should have been mine. The color drained from her face, and the confidence she had moments before evaporated. "Jake, please, you don't understand," she stammered, her voice shaky. "It wasn't like that. We were just having fun." "Fun?" I interrupted, my patience thin. "You think this is just fun? You invited him to our lake house while I was gone. You think I'm just going to forget that because you say it was harmless. You made a choice, Laura. The confrontation was emotional, the air thick with tension. I could hear her voice crack as she tried to defend herself, but it all came crashing down around her. I had the evidence. I had caught her in the act. As we argued, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the one holding the power now, and I was determined to make her face the consequences of her actions. The anger that fueled me was mixed with a sense of clarity. I realized that I didn't want to be with someone who could betray me so profoundly. As the night wore on, I knew I was on the cusp of a decision that would change everything. I needed to think about what this meant for our marriage, but for now, I relished the feeling of standing up for myself. It was time to take back my life. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. As the night dragged on, I could see that Laura was beginning to crack under the weight of her lies. Her tears were no longer just about guilt. They were about fear, the fear of losing everything she had built with me. I kept replaying the moments of betrayal in my mind, the laughter she had shared with Ryan, the careful way she had hidden her infidelity. It made my blood boil. Jake, I swear, it didn't mean anything, she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. I was just feeling lost, and then Ryan was there. I didn't think it would go this far. I shook my head, incredulous. You didn't think it would go this far. Laura, you made a conscious choice every single day to cheat on me. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, it was a pattern. You didn't just wake up one day and decide to throw our marriage away. You planned it. You invited him to our home. You thought I wouldn't find out, didn't you? She looked at me, desperation etched across her face. I was going to tell you, I just needed more time, I swear. Time, that was rich. I couldn't believe she was actually trying to twist herself out of this. More time. For what? To find another excuse, to plan another rendezvous. I emphasized each word, letting them sink in. I felt like I was arguing with a stranger, not the woman I had married. She took a step back, and for the first time I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Perhaps she realized that the ground beneath her was crumbling, that she had gambled everything and lost. In that moment, I made my decision. I wouldn't let her manipulate me any longer. I was done being the forgiving husband who tried to make excuses for her erratic behavior. This time I would take control of my life. Laura, I said, my voice calm but firm, I don't think I can do this anymore. You've broken my trust, and I can't just pretend everything is okay. The air grew thick with tension as her breath hitched. What are you saying? Are you really going to throw everything away over a mistake? A mistake, that's what you're calling this. This isn't just some little error in judgment. You betrayed me. You chose him over me. You've shown me who you really are, and that's not someone I can be with. Her expression morphed from desperation to anger. You think you're so perfect, don't you? You have no idea how hard it's been for me. You're always off hunting or working late. I felt so alone. This was where it got tricky. I had always been a dedicated husband, and there were certainly times when I was preoccupied with work or my hobbies. But I had never once given her a reason to believe I would cheat on her. So instead of coming to me, you decided to sleep with someone else. That's your solution. I could see her struggling to come up with a retort. The anger simmered down, and I sensed a shift. The defensiveness was wearing thin. She began to realize that she was losing this battle. I never wanted to hurt you, she finally muttered, her voice breaking. I just wanted to feel wanted again. Wanted. I had poured my heart into our marriage, into her. It stung to hear her say that she didn't feel it. But I realized that this was a distortion of her reality. She had chosen to seek validation from someone else rather than confront her feelings with me. I could feel my heart hardening as the reality of our situation settled in. I didn't want to be her emotional crutch anymore. I had spent years trying to make her feel secure, and this was the thanks I got. I had to let her go. After a long pause, I took a deep breath. I think it's best if we separate for a while. I need time to think about what I really want, and you need to figure out what you want as well. This isn't working anymore. Her face paled at the suggestion, and I saw a flicker of panic cross her features. Jake, please don't do this. We can work it out. I can change. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything. Laura, I said firmly, this isn't about whether you can change or not. It's about trust, and you've shattered mine. I can't build a future with someone who has done this to me. I need to protect myself. She looked lost, almost defeated. It was heartbreaking to see her like this, but I had to be strong. I knew that if I showed any signs of weakness, it would only give her the leverage to manipulate me further. I stood up and walked toward the door. I'll stay with a friend for a while. I think it's best for both of us if we have some space. As I opened the door, she called out to me one last time. Jake, please, I love you. I don't want to lose you. But I knew in that moment that the love I had felt for her had been tainted by betrayal. I simply closed the door behind me, shutting out the heartbreak and confusion. I drove to a friend's apartment, my mind racing. I felt a mix of relief and sadness flooding through me. I knew this was the right decision, but it didn't make it any easier. I had the gnawing sensation in my gut that this was only the beginning of a long and painful journey. As I lay in my friend's spare room that night, I plugged my phone into the charger, finally willing to process what this all meant. I felt raw and exposed, but part of me was also hopeful. I was free from the shackles of betrayal, and now it was time to focus on healing, on figuring out who I was outside of my marriage. I realized then that this would not just be about revenge or anger. It would be about reclaiming my life and my self-worth. I had been through the fire, and while I was still smoldering, I was determined to rise from the ashes. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. The first few days after I left Laura were some of the toughest of my life. I felt like I was in a nightmare, waking up to a reality that was stark and painful. My friends rallied around me, offering support and distraction, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face and the betrayal that echoed in my mind. It was suffocating. I spent my days at work trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but I was barely functioning. Colleagues noticed my distracted demeanor, and when they asked, I simply shrugged it off. I wanted to keep this private. It was my struggle, not a show for the office. But the moment I stepped out of the office, the weight of what had happened would crash over me again. I found solace in long runs through the local park. The physical exertion helped clear my mind, and for brief moments, I'd forget about Laura and the mess we had become. The regular rhythm of my feet pounding against the pavement offered a fleeting escape. I focused on my breathing, counted my strides, and tried to push the hurt away. After a week of uncertainty and emotional turmoil, I decided it was time to confront Laura again, not to reconcile, but to finalize the separation. I owed it to both of us to draw clear boundaries. I needed to define how we would move forward, especially regarding our finances and the house. I returned to our home, keeping my heart guarded and my emotions in check. The moment I stepped inside, the atmosphere felt heavy. It was strange being there without the warmth and laughter that once filled the space. Laura was sitting on the couch, looking small in her oversized hoodie, the remnants of her makeup smeared from tears. "Jake," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't think you'd come back." "I needed to talk," I replied, my tone firm but devoid of anger. I wanted to be rational. "We need to figure out how to move forward." She nodded, and for a moment we sat in silence. I could feel the tension hanging in the air, thick and unyielding. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "I think it's best if we start the divorce process." Her face fell, and I watched as her eyes filled with tears again. "You don't really mean that, do you? We can fix this. I'll do anything." My heart ached at her desperation, but I hardened my resolve. "Laura, I've tried to understand, to be patient, but I can't ignore the reality of what you did. I need to protect myself, and that means letting go of this marriage." She lunged forward, grasping my hands, her grip desperate. "Just give me a chance. I can change. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. Please don't throw our love away." "I wish it were that simple," I said, gently pulling my hands away. "But love isn't enough when trust is broken. You chose to betray me multiple times, and now I have to choose to protect myself." I could see her processing my words, and the realization began to dawn on her. "You're serious," she whispered. "You really want to end our marriage?" "Yes," I replied, this time with a firmness that surprised even me. "I think it's the only way for both of us to truly move on. I want to start fresh, and I can't do that if I'm still tied to you." Tears streamed down her face as she recoiled slightly, as though my words were physical blows. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said, her voice cracking. "Neither did I, but you made this choice, Laura. You need to understand the impact of your actions." She wiped her tears and I could see the fight in her eyes fading. What happens next? We'll need to split our finances and figure out the house, I said, taking a seat across from her. I'm willing to be fair, but I have to look out for myself. I could tell she was grappling with the idea of losing everything, the house, our life together, and me. It was a harsh reality, but it was the reality she had created. I'll move out wherever you want, she said, voice trembling. Just please don't make this harder than it has to be. We spent the next hour going over the logistics of our separation. It felt surreal, discussing the details of a life that had crumbled. Despite the sadness that lingered, I felt a sense of empowerment in reclaiming my life. I wasn't the guy who would let betrayal slide. I was taking a stand, and it felt liberating. After we reached an agreement, I stood up to leave, but Laura grabbed my arm one last time. Please remember the good times, she said softly. I never wanted to hurt you. I looked into her eyes, feeling a mixture of pity and resolve. I'll remember, but I can't ignore the hurt you caused. It's time for both of us to move on. I walked out of that house with a lighter heart, knowing I had taken a significant step towards closure. The journey wouldn't be easy, but I felt that familiar fire igniting within me. I was ready to focus on myself and my future. I knew it was time to rediscover who I was outside of the marriage, to reclaim my life. Over the next few weeks, I poured my energy into self-improvement. I signed up for a local boxing class, something I had always talked about but never pursued. The physicality of it helped release pent-up frustration and anger, and I found a community of people who were also on their journeys. I learned to channel my hurt into something productive. I also started therapy. It was uncomfortable at first, but I began to unpack the emotional baggage I had been carrying. My therapist encouraged me to confront my feelings head-on, teaching me how to express my anger and hurt in healthy ways. Each session peeled back layers I didn't even realize were there, and I slowly began to heal. I focused on my friends too, leaning on them for support. We spent weekends hiking, going to concerts, and just enjoying life. Laughter began to seep back into my days, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was breathing again. As the days turned into weeks, I felt stronger. I had no idea what the future would hold, but I was ready to embrace it. I learned that I was capable of more than I had given myself credit for. I no longer wanted to be defined by the betrayal. I wanted to be defined by my strength and resilience. The journey was far from over, and I knew there would be tough moments ahead, but I was ready to face them. I had learned an important lesson about trust and self-worth, and I was determined to come out on the other side stronger than ever. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself navigating this new chapter of my life with a mixture of trepidation and excitement. I had moved into a small apartment not too far from our old home, and while it was a significant change, I was slowly starting to feel at home in my new space. It was a blank canvas, and I had the freedom to decorate it however I wanted. No reminders of Laura, no echoes of our past. I continued going to therapy, and it became a cornerstone of my healing process. My therapist encouraged me to explore my emotions, not just the anger and hurt, but also the sense of loss and confusion. I learned to express my feelings through journaling, and it became a therapeutic outlet that helped me articulate my thoughts. Of course, there were still moments when I'd catch myself thinking about Laura, even weeks after our separation. I'd see a couple holding hands or hear a song that reminded me of her, and the pang of sadness would hit me like a freight train. But each time it happened, I reminded myself that I was moving forward. I was no longer a victim of betrayal. I was reclaiming my life. One evening, as I was unwinding with a book, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Laura. "Can we talk? I've been doing a lot of thinking." My heart raced as I stared at the screen. Part of me was curious about what she wanted to say, while another part of me felt apprehensive. After everything that had happened, I didn't know if I was ready to hear her voice again. I debated for a few minutes before finally responding. "Sure, let's meet at the coffee shop down the road." We agreed to meet the next day, and I spent the night tossing and turning, wondering what she wanted to discuss. I thought about how much had changed since she had last been in my life. I had grown stronger, more self-assured, and I was determined not to let her manipulate my emotions again. When I walked into the cafe the next day, I spotted her sitting at a corner table. She looked different, more put together than I remembered, with her hair neatly styled and a confident air about her. But beneath that exterior, I could still see the vulnerability. As I approached, she gave me a small, tentative smile, and I felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over me. "Thanks for meeting with me," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Of course," I replied, taking a seat across from her. "What did you want to talk about?" She took a deep breath, her expression serious. "I've been doing a lot of reflecting since we separated. I realize now how much I hurt you and how my actions affected not just our marriage but your life as a whole. I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused." I nodded, not sure how to respond. It was refreshing to hear genuine remorse from her, but I was still guarded. "I appreciate you saying that, Laura. It took me a long time to process everything. I've started going to therapy as well," she continued, her eyes earnest. "I'm learning about my behaviors and how I can be a better person. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to take responsibility for what I did." Her sincerity was striking, and while I wanted to believe her, a part of me remained skeptical. The wounds from our past were still fresh, and trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. "It's going to take time," I said cautiously. "Trust is earned, and right now I need to focus on myself." "I understand," she replied, her voice filled with a mixture of sadness and acceptance. "I don't want to pressure you or make things harder. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on myself, and I hope one day we can find a way to be in each other's lives again." We spent the next hour talking about our lives, our individual journeys since the separation, and the lessons we had both learned. It felt surreal to have this conversation with her, and despite the underlying tension, there was a sense of closure in the air. As we wrapped up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had faced her, and while the past was still there, I could also see a path forward, a path that was no longer defined by her betrayal. We parted ways amicably, and as I walked back to my apartment, I felt lighter. That evening, I met up with some friends for dinner. As we sat around the table, laughing and sharing stories, I realized how far I had come. I was surrounded by people who cared about me, who lifted me up, and I could see a future that didn't revolve around the pain of my past. Months went by, and life continued to unfold. I found my stride at work, taking on new projects and embracing challenges that came my way. My friendships deepened, and I began to open up about my experiences, finding strength in vulnerability. I even started dating again, slowly of course, but each new connection helped me regain confidence in myself. One sunny Saturday afternoon, I found myself at a local art fair. As I wandered through the various booths, I stumbled upon a painting that caught my eye. It was vibrant and alive, a stark contrast to the muted tones of my past. As I stood there admiring it, I felt an overwhelming sense of hope. Perhaps my life was like that painting, chaotic and messy, but filled with potential. I realized that I was no longer defined by Laura's betrayal or the pain it had caused. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, to build a future filled with love, laughter, and fulfillment. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. I was moving forward, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely free. Let me know when you're ready for the final part. As I continued to navigate this new chapter in my life, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and self-worth. The separation from Laura had become more than just an end to our marriage. It had transformed into a journey of self-discovery. Each day was a step further away from the pain of betrayal and toward a brighter future. Over the next few months, I embraced my interests more fiercely than before. I took up photography, capturing the beauty of the world around me, and it became both a creative outlet and a form of therapy. Each click of the camera was a reminder that I was capable of finding beauty even in the most unexpected places. I began experimenting with different styles and techniques, eventually even participating in a few local exhibitions. The thrill of sharing my work with others helped me rediscover my passion for life. But the most significant change came when I met someone new. Her name was Sarah. We were introduced through mutual friends, and from our first conversation there was an undeniable chemistry. Unlike Laura, Sarah was open, genuine, and had a contagious laugh that lit up the room. She shared my love for the outdoors and was adventurous, always keen to try new experiences. At first, I was hesitant to dive into a new relationship. The scars from my past still lingered, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to open my heart again. But as we spent more time together, hiking, exploring, and capturing moments through my camera, I began to see the potential for something beautiful. Sarah was patient and understanding, never rushing me but encouraging me to take my time. One evening, as we walked along the beach during sunset, I realized how far I had come. The waves crashed against the shore, each one a reminder of the ebb and flow of life. I turned to her, feeling a warmth in my chest that had been absent for so long. "I know this is still new, but I want you to know how much I appreciate you," I said, my voice steady. She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I appreciate you too, Jake. I can see how strong you've become and I admire your journey. It's inspiring." That moment solidified my decision. I was ready to embrace love once more. I had learned to trust myself, to believe that I was worthy of happiness, despite the heartbreak I had endured. Slowly but surely, I began to let go of the past, not just in my mind but in my heart. As the relationship blossomed, I found myself recalling the lessons I had learned through the tumultuous experience with Laura. I understood the importance of open communication, trust, and honesty. Those were the foundations I wanted to build my new relationship upon. Sarah and I talked about everything, ensuring we both felt safe and understood. I wanted to ensure that I would never fall into the same patterns of pain again. Eventually, I decided to reach out to Laura one last time. I felt it was important to close that chapter for good and to ensure we both had an opportunity to heal from the past. We met at a local park, the same place where we had spent so many happy moments. It felt surreal to be there, but I was determined to embrace it as a part of my journey. When we sat down together, it was different from the last time. There was no anger, only a mutual understanding of what had transpired. "Jake," she began, her voice steady, "I've been doing some soul searching and I realize I was selfish. I'm truly sorry for everything I put you through. I hope you can find happiness." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. "I've moved on, Laura. I'm focusing on myself and finding my happiness, and I genuinely hope you do the same." She smiled softly, a hint of relief in her eyes. "I'm glad to hear that. You deserve all the happiness in the world." As I walked away from that meeting, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had finally let go of the past, of the anger, the hurt, and the betrayal. I realized that while Laura had been a significant part of my life, she no longer defined my future. In the months that followed, I continued to grow in ways I never thought possible. With Sarah by my side, I embraced new adventures, experienced the thrill of love again, and focused on building a life filled with joy and purpose. I learned to appreciate the little things, the sunsets over the lake, the laughter shared with friends, and the warmth of love without the shadows of betrayal. Each day felt like a blank canvas, and I was the artist, free to create my own masterpiece. I had emerged from the fire, scarred but beautiful, ready to embrace whatever came next. Looking back now, I can see that the betrayal was a catalyst for my transformation. It pushed me to confront my deepest fears, to challenge my beliefs about love and trust, and ultimately to reclaim my life. I learned that healing is a journey, not a destination, and it's okay to take the time you need to find your way. I didn't just survive, I thrived. And for that, I am grateful. In the end, I learned that sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the most beautiful revelations. Trust yourself, protect your heart, and never settle for anything less than you deserve. Life is too precious to spend it in the shadows of betrayal. Embrace the light, it's waiting for you.